said it after I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
Listen to all this,
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with money.
Look at that accountability gap.
Aren't you ashamed?
Come on, guys. Step into the breach.
No, I couldn't go alone, I'm afraid.
You know you wanna. For the past few weeks, we've been discussing the accountability gap, a gender disparity in social perception of people's culpability for the impact of their choices on themselves and on others. We've pointed out that it manifests in conjunction with male disposability, people's tendency to subordinate men's welfare and interests to those of others, and gynocentrism, people's tendency to prioritize women and their interests. This leaves us with a society which tends to sacrifice men for the perceived benefit of women whenever there's conflict between the two, or to shift accountability for the consequences of women's actions to the nearest or most involved man. A particularly blatant accountability gap is found in the legal and social response when the nature of a sex act is in dispute. This manifests in several ways, including consent standards which presume a female gatekeeper, male seeker dynamic and treat men's end of flirting as a predatory act, social perception of female predators as innocent victims, and support systems including laws which presume sexual assault perpetrators male and victims female. In part, this stems from the historical approach to marriage in middle and upper-class society back when it was mainly arranged. Intermarriage and childbearing cemented contracts and other agreements between families and tribes, with childbearing and fidelity being part of the contract. This made sexual violence, which would have been strictly defined as a contravention of a woman's refusal, an affront to her honor, and an attack on her whole family or tribe, and the impact was that it made her an unmarriageable burden on her family. It essentially inflicted a disability. That is what differentiated it from other equally violent types of assault, and it's also why society had a different response when it was done to a woman than when it was done to a man by a woman. It wasn't because such violence had no physical, emotional, or psychological impact on guys, but because of the social and economic impact it had on the woman and her family. We don't live in that environment anymore. Western social norms and laws don't limit a woman's prospects based on any man's willingness or unwillingness to take responsibility for her. We have control over the direction of our lives, and marriage is a choice. Courtship, however, has always been treated as a man's responsibility involving initiation of contact, pursuit, and persuasion. The woman's role in that is simply to judge and make a choice to accept or reject her suitor's advances, a decision that once would have been up to her father. While women's advancement has evolved society's perception of sexual violence to that of a crime against the individual's person, as in a violation of bodily autonomy, because of the aforementioned dynamics, it remains seen as a gendered crime. That's all before feminists began exploiting social reaction to it for political power and money. For decades, mainstream organized feminists have pushed society to define sexual violence not as a perpetrator's act of contravening the victim's refusal, but as a male sex seeker's failure to properly babysit a prospective partner's state of mind. Even adamant verbal confirmation can later be considered coerced, just by the guy having asked for consent. And in today's world, that defines his response to it as sexual violence. The movement has successfully convinced many women, and far too many institutions, that a woman's withdrawal of consent after she has participated in a sex act can change the man's status from participant to rapist. A man's consent, however, is presumed a given, whether his female partner asked for it or not. What does that mean in terms of accountability? A woman can be considered a victim of her own choice to engage in consensual sex. A woman can be considered incapacitated under circumstances that would not be considered incapacitating to a man. A female perpetrator of sexual assault can be considered a victim of her own choice to engage in sex with a person who is incapacitated or not old enough to consent. A female perpetrator of sexual assault can be viewed as harmless, even if she uses force or her victim is underage. One result of this is that a male victim of sexual violence is far less likely to be considered a victim if his perpetrator is female. He may even be held responsible for her behavior. Any complaint made by a male victim of female-perpetrated sexual violence puts him at risk for being castigated or mocked rather than eliciting compassion or gaining him any recourse. A female perpetrator may react to her concern that her male victim might make a complaint by preemptively falsely accusing him. A female sexual assailant, therefore, has a strong chance of avoiding arrest or conviction, and even if convicted, she has a strong chance of receiving a lighter sentence and far less of a hit to her reputation than would a male assailant who committed the same offense. She may even be convicted of a lesser offense for the same act. Another result is the listen and believe standard. A male victim of a false accusation of sexual violence is obligated to prove his innocence rather than his accuser being obligated to prove his guilt, and even proof of his innocence may not save his reputation. Yet another stark double standard occurs when there is a mutually engaged drunk sex act. The presence of alcohol is automatically perceived to invalidate the female partner's capacity for consent, but not that of the male partner, imposing the perpetrator label on him and the victim label on her, regardless of their choices. This manifestation of the gap sees society in general, and especially feminists, treating women as powerless objects whose behavior is shaped only by external pressure, wherein nothing one does matters. Women face little to no accountability standards in heterosexual relationships, while, as with reproductive rights, a man can be criminally liable for how his partner feels. Women aren't really responsible for either establishing and enforcing their own boundaries or respecting those of others. Feminist advocates, having turned heterosexual sex into a political football, have exacerbated these issues rather than providing solutions. Partly as a result of this, there are growing numbers of men who have simply turned their backs and walked away, limiting themselves to the most superficial levels of interaction with women. The feminist temper tantrum over this has been predictably self-centered and gloriously illuminating. It's an undisguised but inept claim of ownership over men. And I've asked before, ladies, what honest, compelling reason can you offer to counter the existing circumstances which provoked this response? My personal answer is none, and I've had nothing from women's advocates to counter it. The naked truth is that the removal of accountability negates the value of anything else women have to offer men, as without it, the risks far outweigh any benefits of seeking intimacy. There are men with whom the rift between the sexes is deep, insurmountable, and permanent. Women's only chance at rebuilding the connection between the sexes with those who have yet to be pushed that far is firmly rooted in growing up and taking equal responsibility as consenting adults. And it had better happen soon, because that rift is being cut deeper and wider every day by agitators making demands in women's name. Hello, and welcome to Technical Difficulties Part 2. The darn thing isn't supposed to start over when I hit close.
It's not even showing the right people currently.
No, it's not showing the right screen. It went to the wrong screen, and it's still not showing the right people. So it doesn't matter.
Oh, no,
everything I did is undone. That's
what can
okay.
You do?
I can cuss a lot. You guys want to hear it?
Okay.
No. You guys do not want to hear it. But welcome to HBR Talk 17 #MeToo, the accountability gap. And it's the accountability gap amplified this time because we're louder. But don't look at us like that, guys. You're totally asking for it. And besides, we're chicks, and everyone knows that chicks can't be guilty of ear rape. It's categorized as auditory assault. And speaking of sensory rape, if you want to join in the chat on YouTube, please go to the Badger live streams channel. If YouTube is experiencing platform malfunction syndrome and won't let you listen, we're also on Twitch. I think we're not on Facebook today. I think we're having some technical difficulties with Facebook as well. So if you're into this kind of thing and you want us to go deeper and harder and faster, consider becoming a patron at feedthebadger.com. After all, big mouth's got to be fed, right? I'm here tonight with the beautiful and brilliant Anna Cherry and that adorable specter of death, Prim Reaper, to ream society's back end over a few things. Our topic is the gender gap in accountability for sexual conduct. We hear a lot about sexual misconduct, usually with plenty of blame being heaped on the male sex as an entity instead of a population of individuals, but there's little talk, if any, relating to accountability to sexual conduct. Relating accountability simply to sexual conduct, rather. Much of the conflict between the genders over sexual conduct today is a result of stark gender differences in accountability for setting and enforcing one's own boundaries, protecting one's own privacy, recognizing one's own autonomy, and exercising one's own personal agency, recognizing others' autonomy and accepting others' personal agency, respecting others' boundaries, respecting others' privacy, and last but really, really not least, communication, which seems to be a huge sticking point.
I'm sorry, Hannah.
Huh?
I have to go check my boyfriend's phone and then get mad at him and not tell him why I'm mad at him. So, sorry.
Communication. See? Communication. But where accountability for these aspects of sexual conduct equal between the sexes, how different do you think modern discussion on sexual conduct and misconduct would be?
This whole discussion has just been really irritating me lately, and I think, fingers crossed, that more people are starting to see the nonsense involved in it. I've seen stories regarding people being hesitant to hire women now, and aside from being one myself, I can totally understand the hesitation, because God knows all it takes is 2 words from a woman to implicate an entire man's life, and then whoops, there goes your career. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing this or how much positive regard you've built up from everybody else. What can you do?
Yeah, you're automatically suspect if you're a male, and of course you're automatically must be telling the truth if you're a woman. I mean, even the whole situation with Lena Dunham's male friend writer and the woman who accused him, she had to apologize. So, she had an understanding that, I have information that maybe other people don't, that this is maybe not as clear cut or as accurate as this woman is making it seem to be. But, oh, wait, no, now I need to apologize and completely ignore the truth and reality because of this feels idea that we all are trying to uphold for, I don't even know whose benefit. It certainly is not helping women. It is not helping men in the slightest either, which of course nobody cares about that because the whole thing's about helping women. But no, feminism is about helping men too. Or wait, no, I don't know. Which one is it?
Yeah, really.
I know we're going to be rimming here, Hannah. I would have asked for consent. Oh, but wait, is asking also now supposedly an egregious violation? So are you supposed to ask or are you not supposed to ask?
Well, then, you're only supposed to ask if the other person wants you to ask. You have to get consent to ask now. How's that for...
You have to get consent to get consent.
Exactly. It's just one big ridiculous ladder. We're just going to keep going down and down into hell, and it's never going to stop.
Because we're going in circles.
But you guys realize that going down is sexual assault too, right?
Oh, shit. Can't do anything, man, without just, wow, all right. But in the meantime, juvenile detention centers have, egregious rates of female on male rape that had to do with minors, older women raping minor boys. And then we have an extreme amount of rape in prisons. But it's okay to joke about, rape in prison. Don't drop the soap. That's okay to have those jokes. But any other kind of jokes about female rape, well, that's just violence against women. But you can joke against men and you can say kill all men, and those jokes are okay because they're men, they have feelings, they don't care. Ha.
Of course, that's how it goes, right? It's there's something that I've been saying a few times in the last couple of over the last little while. You know how we were talking about this in the last podcast about how women are basically just seen as are basically just children now. They have no accountability. It's like, oh, you're just a woman. You don't have to worry about it. You have no accountability. Well, okay, what
Unless
I've
you're a
been
conservative woman. Oh,
oh no. but okay, but what I've been saying is that we can't have it both ways. We can't have women be seen as a respected equal to men while still having zero accountability for everything. If women are not able to control their actions, if women are not able to control themselves when drinking, if women don't get to have any aren't counted to have responsibility for anything that they do, then they are not equal, and perhaps they should be chaperoned. I don't think that this is something that would be ideal, but we can't have it both ways. So either we have women be treated like children and be chaperoned by a responsible, I guess, male partner, because it's not like it would be effective to be chaperoned by another female child, or they get treated like adults, equal to men, and they have equal responsibilities. This includes equal responsibilities for doing shitty things like falsely accusing somebody of rape or really any other crime that they don't get equal punishments for. But we can't have it both ways. We can't keep it going down this path of no responsibilities and no punishments for anything. It just doesn't work that way.
well, see, that would be accurate if the narrative was framed that way. But I don't actually even think it's framed like that. It's framed as, well, it's not about a woman not being able to control herself when she drinks. It's the man who should be told not to rape. They completely jump over personal responsibility. That doesn't even come into question, that you put yourself in a situation where you led someone on, because you know what, I've had to go through sort of body language training. I've had to understand, what are we communicating with our bodies? What am I communicating to a man if I'm looking at him, smiling at him repeatedly, if I leave myself open to approach? I mean, body language is 90% of our communication as primates, as humans, period. So you are communicating, you are sending signals out there. So if you truly don't want men to bother you, guess what? It's really easy to do. I've done it. You just look like an unapproachable bitch, and it fucking works. It's really fucking simple.
Jeez. So in other words, you look like a social justice warrior.
Oh, there you go. Make
You look like their
god-awful
attitude.
fish face.
Oh, God.
Yeah,
Yes,
like,
I do. I personify their attitude with my body language, and guess what? Nobody fucking bothers me.
There you go.
yeah,
See,
make
th-
that
but at times-
god-awful fish face that they sometimes do, and then there you go. Then they'll know to avoid you.
But you know, not even just that. Like we are all humans that are living in this planet, bumping into each other like little bumper cars. A lot of it is not intentional. A lot of it is just trying to fucking figure out what to do as a human. And so you're in a store, right? Even if you make yourself the most unapproachable person ever, there's still going to be somebody who's going to come by and like creepily whisper in your ear that they like your skirt. You know what? That's happened. And guess what? Just fucking let it go, because you do your own laundry list of shit that people find uncomfortable, but nobody fucking tells you about it. So you feel like you're perfect and you're a woman and you never transgress. Because guess what? If men try to say that something bothers them, if they try to indicate that something's not quite comfortable, they get made fun of for it. They get shut down immediately. They are not allowed to express nearly the 10th of what women are allowed to express in their feely feels.
Yeah, or they would get called a misogynist for, daring to comment on a woman's behavior.
But nothing goes the other way, like it goes towards the male. And that's the core of the fucking problem, that it is not equal. It is not about equality. It never has been.
That's where we have a serious inequality in terms of where you were talking about accountability. The difference in the sexes regarding boundaries, setting and enforcing boundaries. Like, women are not expected to set and enforce boundaries. Men are just expected to know a woman's boundaries and respect them, even if her boundaries are different than the last woman he was around. Whereas women aren't even expected to respect men's boundaries. If a guy sets a boundary and enforces it, somehow he's the asshole.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, because there was a whole discussion I saw. I don't remember exactly where it was, but somebody was saying, oh, if she's sitting on the train and she's doing something, like don't bother her, just don't talk to her, just be on your way. And I'm like, okay, you don't speak for all women, because I happen to rather like it when people talk to me on the train. I've had some great conversations that way. I find it very interesting. So, quite frankly, to stop making the world a more secluded and less social place. Thank you very much.
Right. We are being we're beheld by, I don't know. We are being my English is just turning off right now. We're being held hostage by the ideas and whims of the loud minority. And that's
Yes.
sort of the problem, also, because anytime you have a woman that is different, like, a conservative woman like Tommy Lahren, for instance, or any other woman that has been in some way abused, or in some way transgressed against, or in some way believes not what the rest of the women believe, then it's okay to, she deserves the transgression, or she deserves to have one in the future because she's not our in group. And so women like us as well, anti-feminists, or like a liberal anti-feminist like myself, or sex workers that are non-feminists, they get completely destroyed by the loud minority, because they have an idea that of how people should behave towards them, that is completely different from this preferred group that everyone's listening to. And it's kind of unfortunate that we can have a witch hunt against women by women. It's like, what's her face? I think it was Anita Sarkeesian, maybe, saying that, or some woman like that who was involved with her. I don't quite remember, but it happened during Gamergate, where this woman wrote a thread and talking about how Anita, I think it was against Anita. Yeah, Anita's a popular girl, and everybody on her behest stuffed this girl into the locker. And that's what keeps happening. Girls like us keep getting stuffed into lockers by boys on behest of the in group, the popular girls, which happens to be feminism. And it's like, are you guys, how are we less women? So if you have this idea that women need to be protected and upheld and believed and treasured and worship the ground they walk on at all times, what makes us so different? Don't we have a vagina too? Does it not bleed? Come on.
It's almost the anti-woman speech right there. But you think about that. I can't count how many times I've had somebody decide on Twitter that I must be male because I'm making arguments that women aren't allowed to make. That's always fun because I'll post something that demonstrates that, yeah, this is me and I'm female, and they'll block, or they'll get upset or whatever, or they'll say, well, you look like a guy, you must be high
Oh,
testosterone. Like, well,
jeez.
Well,
you
yeah,
know,
guess what? So what?
Yes.
I
I
look just like my brother, so I kind of, if you want to say a guy in terms of, well, there's one guy that I look like. Actually, there's two if you count when my dad was young. But hey,
I'm
I
sorry.
don't understand why that's an insult.
High testosterone people are more effective. They just are. Like, sorry, that's sort of where the whole patriarchy thing comes from, where you're like, oh, look at these men, they're doing all these terrible things. Yeah, because they're effective at doing shit.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's going to be evil shit, but high testosterone is effective at getting shit done. That is just how it is. I'm sorry,
Well, that
but I
is
Yeah,
do
well,
true.
I
want to.
mean,
That is true. It does seem to cause you to be more likely to knuckle down and deal with shit. And I
Absolutely.
know because I had a sort of different attitude before and after I had my son.
Hmm.
And I know that I had an increase in testosterone in my system when I had my son because my hair changed. Um, I can't say that I have a beard because you can't count 3 hairs as a beard. That's what we tell teenagers, but it's still there. And, and the shape of my hands changed. And it did change a lot of
well,
things. And I think part of the reason that the accountability gap exists is because there is a natural tendency among men to be more likely to take accountability for something, to be more likely to knuckle down and deal with shit. And there is
well,
a natural tendency among women to be more likely to call for help. And
Yeah,
I
I think
think
yeah,
a part
it,
I
of
it
think that gets coddled. And it's as wide as it is because it gets coddled. But I think the
yeah,
start of it is
socialization.
natural, is biology.
For sure,
Yeah.
boys are told to shut up and not cry, and girls are, every whim is given to me. So it's natural and then socialized into the worst sort of aspect of it.
Yeah, and one thing I just wanted to bring up also is that, like you said, a lot of people are saying, "Oh, testosterone is more likely to make evil people," but it's also way more likely to make people who are willing to do amazing things in order to put themselves out there to help others. Like
Mhm.
look at the majority of men are firemen, are policemen, are all of these jobs that are like putting themselves in danger to actively help other people. And I think that's wonderful. And I think that there are a lot more like kind and wonderful and helping men than there are these evil men, but somehow feminism likes to take these few outliers and like broaden them to define all men, and it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, look, it's a tool. A male cooperation is a tool. It builds societies, it builds bravery, honor, self-sacrifice, everything fucking good, and it also builds armies. That's just how it is. It can be used for good, it can be used for bad, because it is effective. It is a thing that works. It is a cooperation that brings about stuff. What stuff that is? But which one would you rather have? Would you rather be effectual and then it possibly go wrong into something evil, or do you want to be completely ineffectual and unable to do anything or further the species or just be a wet blanket on the ground? Like which way do you go? I can make arguments for both, but as a high testosterone person myself, and as someone who sees the beauty in men, I absolutely go the sort of the high testosterone route, because on the other
Yeah.
hand, you have the feminine aspect, which is supposed to be caring, nurturing, allowing, like wanting every baby to live, wanting, no matter how wrong somebody or something is wrong with someone, you still try to help them and you try to raise them and you nurture them, and that's beautiful aspect of estrogen. But then you also
Mhm.
have the cattiness, the infighting, the lack of loyalty, the complete sort of selfishness. There are drawbacks and benefits, but sometimes you might need to pick one of the two sides. Do you want to be effectual, or do you want to just not get anything done?
Yeah, this is something that I find really important that you just said. There are positive and negative sides to both groups. And I think that it's important to acknowledge that. Like it's important to celebrate the positive aspects of both men and women. But as far as the negatives go, men are being demonized for any possible negatives that some of them might have, whereas women's negative aspects, the cattiness and all the duplicity, the manipulation, all these other things that you were talking about, like they're basically shoved under the rug and nobody talks about them, and women are basically just regarded as perfect angels, and that's creating this huge inequity in how we see the sexes, and it just drives me nuts because there's such a lack of appreciation for what men are doing right now, and I think that that's one of the things that really needs to change. We need to like take a strong reverse in this direction that we've been going in the last few years, because it is like devastating to men's self-esteem, to men's sense of like purpose in life. I've talked to so many men on a regular basis that are just like, I don't even know what to do anymore. I just don't feel like there's any place for me in this world, and it really bothers me.
Well, and
Yeah,
it's important. The feedback itself is important. It's important for the individual men. It's important for individual men to know that they're valued, and it's also a motivator. It's about morale. You think about it. If the reason that you do something is because you want to have a positive effect in the world, and you never get to hear about that positive effect, and you're not allowed to judge it for yourself as a positive effect, right? You're not allowed to be proud of what you do, and you're not allowed to ask. You're not allowed to look for that feedback, and society does nothing but tell you that you're a monster. You
Yeah.
lose your motivation to do all of those good things.
yeah,
Um,
humans feel best when they're useful.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and it's not only it's not just cruel. It is cruel. It's very cruel to
Yeah.
men to not value them. And women would not put up with that for 5 seconds. Women are always tooting their own horns. Women are always telling
Yeah.
everybody how great they are, and how great each other are, and then they'll sit around and have love fests, and we even have special ways of insulting each other by giving compliments because We have to speak in compliments, right? That's what a neg is, right?
Oh,
Um,
bless your heart.
yeah, so I mean, we wouldn't deal very well with not being allowed to have that positive feedback for our effect from our, of our effect in the world. Hell, women don't even take criticism as well as men do. But to not have anything like that is just unfair to them. And at the same time, the dumbest thing that we can do is take that positive feedback away from the people who it has motivated for centuries to build our society and make things better for us. Um, but I want to get into, we've got some super chats. We have, I think, 4 or 5 here. So I'm going to go through and just sort of go down the list and read them. The first one is from Ziranx, who gave us $5 and said, the scary thing is that women did this to men over children, and then they did it again regarding women. Now, women are worried that they went too far. Um, and, I think that's a very good point. It took it took people starting to recognize the damage that was done to men before people recognized that mistreating men was wrong. That's sad.
It is
You know,
sad.
and
I think people
it's
just don't appreciate the men in their lives, and I don't understand it.
That almost sounds like an immature thing where you have, for instance, somebody who's young and they have like this dog that gets in the trash all the time, and then they get angry and then they kick the dog, and then they notice that they broke the dog's leg, and they're like, "Holy fucking shit! Wait a minute, maybe my actions have consequences. Maybe I shouldn't be acting on emotion." And all this torrent of sort of understanding happens after the fact because of lack of maturity. So maybe it's something like that.
yeah, it seems a very immature thing. And now that you put that way, that's actually kind of when my brother was really really little, little enough that consequence following action hadn't been a lesson learned yet, right? And I was 2 years older than him, so I think at that point in my life I was almost twice his age, maybe more than twice his age, um, because he was just barely old enough to talk, and he bit me. And, my mother tried to explain to him not to do that because it hurt me. And he didn't understand that it hurt me because it didn't hurt him. So,
Mm-hmm.
mom bit gently, not enough to like actually hurt, but it startled him and he pulls his little arm away and he's like, "Ow!" And she goes, "See, it didn't hurt me, but it hurt you, didn't it?" And he's looking at her like with these big precious moments, little my brother had the cutest face when he was a kid, right? And I'm sitting there like, if I was gonna cry at that moment, it wouldn't have been because my arm hurt. It would have been because of the precious moments, like with the little nose, the freckles that went perfect over the cheeks, right? But he's like, all of a sudden, that expression changed, and it's that eureka moment. Wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to watch my brother learn how to that is something you
Empathy.
pick up as a toddler.
Well, see, there's
And
two kinds of empathy, actually.
yeah,
There's what people call empathy, which is actually not really what in the brain empathy is. Empathy in the brain, in the way that we think of it, or the way it's really difficult to talk about it because there's no other word for the other type of empathy. But what empathy is so far traditionally is mirror neurons, meaning you feel the feeling that the other person has. You are in the same moment as they are. You are dropped off. Let's say they're in the deep end of the pool and they're drowning, and that's what happens to you. You're suddenly in the deep end and you're drowning. So that's mirror neuron empathy. However, then there's the other kind of empathy, the actual true empathy, where it's more of a sort of a logical thing instead of just a mirror, where you understand their life, you understand their motivations, you understand their pain, you understand what's going on, and you're not there in that same feeling. You are able to actually help them, pull them out of the deep end of the pool. You're not just feeling it and then like, that's it, I'm done, I felt your feeling, bye. But there's another level of empathy where you go and you're like, oh, okay, this person needs that. This person feels this way because of that. I need to have an understanding towards them. I need to have forgiveness towards them. I understand what is going on with them, as if it was happening to me, but it's a logical thing instead of an emotional thing. So there's this, that is the sort of the growth of an understanding of consequences of cause and effect and how it impacts other people. And it has nothing to do with you. You're not having any neuron activation. You don't really know what is, you in other words, your brain doesn't feel it as much as it understands it. And so obviously as a child, you're not going to have any amount of empathy, and mirror neurons is the first kind of empathy that we all learn. And that's sort of where women stop a lot of times, and they don't go further into the empathy of understanding other people and their motivations and all that, because if they did, women would be a lot more like men. They would be a lot more forgiving of the transgressions of, oh, he didn't read my mind, he didn't bring the right flowers, he didn't, like, no, instead you would look to see that he spent all day at work and then still managed to stop by somewhere, find the one flower shop that was still open at 10 p.m. and went out of his fucking way in the rain to get you some flowers. And you would understand and have love and appreciation for all of that. But instead, you don't, because you don't have truly developed empathy. You have only the feeling empathy.
I'm gonna
Oh my
let I'm gonna
goodness.
let a super chat jump the line because it's related.
Nope. Okay.
We have Zero Mara 0292 gave us $2 and said, "What you are describing is empathy versus sympathy." And I'm gonna differ from that. I'm gonna disagree with that. Sympathy is when you feel compassion for somebody else's experience. You feel happy because you know somebody else is happy. You feel good about that, or you feel sad because something bad happened to someone. It's not so much necessarily fully comprehending their experience or fully comprehending what they might be feeling at the moment. You don't even have to know, for instance, what it's like to get kicked in the balls. You don't have to be male to feel sympathy, and even be angry at somebody for doing it to somebody you care about. It's the difference is somebody who has balls and knows what it feels like to be kicked there will have a different, very visceral reaction to seeing it happen to somebody else, and that is because that person has the capacity. He has the capacity for empathy towards that experience. And he is capable of having that experience, and he's capable of imagining what that experience really is like, versus knowing that pain hurts and feeling bad for somebody because they're going through pain.
Yeah. I just wanted to kind of jump in with what Anna said, because there was a really good example of that I actually saw it a while ago. I've written to get some work done on it tomorrow, but I'll bring it up here now too. It was this god awful article about this woman complaining about like emotional labor bullshit, but the example that she gave was just so ridiculously absurd and entitled that I almost couldn't believe it. Basically, it was her birthday and she asked her husband to like order her a maid to clean the bathrooms. And then rather than do that, because he's like, oh, this is too expensive and there's no need to spend all of that extra money on this when I could just do it myself, he did it himself. And then she had the audacity to be pissed off at him for cleaning the bathrooms himself rather than doing the thing that she ordered. And it's just like, are you fucking kidding me? I couldn't believe it. Like, there's just such a lack of appreciation. It boggles my mind.
That is an extremely immature response on her part. I mean, when you think about it, she should have had exactly the opposite reaction. That not only did he know that what she wanted was to not have to clean the bathroom, but he was willing to do the work himself if he couldn't afford to hire somebody to do it. He took the extra effort and actually did the job and made sure that he got done what she didn't want to have to do. And he did the thing that she thought was so distasteful that she wanted someone else to do it for her. He did it, and she got upset. I mean, that's it's obvious there that it's as much about control and power and being pampered by financial means, as opposed to enjoying the gift itself. It's like it ruins gift giving when people act like that.
the whole emotional labor thing just really frustrates me, because we have men giving their physical labor both at work and at home, with the gutters cleaning and the mowing the lawn and the taking out the trash and whatever else men are now forced to do as housework, because well, women also work, and so there's less time for them to do housework, which in my opinion is fucking terrible. But anyway, but you also have men give emotional labor as well. Why do we never point out, why haven't we pointed out the fact that there are these assumptions that are laid on men, that, if she's being crazy, just let her. If she, carry her purse, go with to the in-laws, do, whatever the fuck she wants. How are we not seeing that as extra labor that men are doing?
Yeah, you want to talk about emotional labor. Go back to the first grade, go back to kindergarten, okay? When you're like 5 years old, 6 years old, and your sense of self and your sense of individuality and your sense of having a value as a human being is still developing. And and listen to all of the people around you tell you that the opposite gender goes first everywhere for everything that you want, whether it's going to the table at a banquet, whether it's lining up to go out the door, whether it's getting out of the car, into the car, going in or out of the house. Ladies first. You go last because you're a guy. What does that do emotionally to somebody when they're growing up? Imagine the emotional labor that it takes to process, accept, and then not permanently resent. She can hit you, but you can't hit her back because you're bigger and stronger and you can take it, but she can't. Imagine the emotional labor that it takes to slowly be taught over your childhood and your adolescence. Your adolescence, when your hormones are going absolutely nuts, and subjecting to you to the greatest amount of emotional roller coaster you've ever experienced. That when you get involved in a romantic way of any kind, when you have a crush, when she has a crush, when you're holding hands, when you're talking together, anything at all to do with the sex you're attracted to, if you're a straight guy, it's your responsibility. It's always your responsibility. You're automatically the bad guy. You have to be gentle. You have to be careful. You have to be responsible. You have to get her home by 10. And her father is going to kill you if he thinks you did anything wrong, even if it was her idea, because you're responsible and she's not. What emotional labor must be involved in processing and accepting that? And then women bitch about getting a vacuum cleaner for Christmas. One that has all kinds of bells and whistles and makes the job she does every day 10 times easier.
Yeah, no kidding. You kind of put it that way, and then you can really piece together why some guys are opting out of it all.
Yeah, it's that's why I've been talking about the logic that goes along with men going their own way. Since I've learned that the phenomenon is more than just a few hermits. There's always been hermits, right? They're legend in old stories and everything. But it makes perfect sense that this would happen. You can't treat somebody like shit. You can't treat an entire gender like shit for years and years and years, decades and decades, centuries, and then expect some of them not to figure out that it's a raw deal and decide to opt out of it. And, if you bitch about them opting out of it, that just demonstrates your sense of entitlement. It's not going to bring them back. All it's going to do is prove to them that they were right to opt out. So, but to go on, Joey Jojo has a pertinent super chat. He gave us $10. Now this one's a recycled one because I remember this from the previous show. So the 3 ways I can see to stop this is 1, take away women's sexual liberation, best way. 2, sex bots, most realistic way. And 3, 80% of men become celibate and avoid women, hardest way. Now, the way I look at it, it's not realistic to expect that women will stop being sexually liberated, or at least stop practicing what they think is sexual liberation. Because to be honest, screwing everything in sight is not sexual liberation. Having control of yourself and having control of your sexuality, setting and enforcing your own boundaries, protecting your own privacy, recognizing your autonomy, recognizing and exercising your personal agency, and respecting those things in other people, recognizing and respecting their boundaries, their privacy, their autonomy, their agency, and communicating with them, valuing the person that you partner up with, and not just screwing around like a dog in heat. That is sexual liberation. If you feel like, you just got to exercise it to consider yourself liberated, you're as much a slave as the woman who thinks that if she sleeps with more than one partner in her entire life, she's a whore.
Yeah, basically. Like, I mean, I I make this joke on the private Discord, but I'll make it here too. I've made jokes about my mom, and I make jokes about my mom being a time because she is self-admittedly one, and she you said it perfectly. She is exactly, or at least was exactly, a slave to those kind of drives. Um, Gosh, I can't imagine how many men that she brought into the bedroom in her youth. She told me one time it was probably close to 500, and let me just be clear, I did not take after that, but it's obvious that this was something that it didn't bring her happiness. She is lonely and alone now. I don't think that that's the life that anybody would actually aspire to have, and frankly, it's kind of sad. But yeah, this idea of liberation, of having sex whenever you want, it doesn't really jive properly. I've seen it. I've seen what it does to people, and it's not pretty.
And it's not necessarily a condemnation of not being monogamous. Because that is not what I'm getting at. But the idea that you have to, that you can't be, that you have to be promiscuous in order to be liberated, is bullshit. It's not promiscuity that liberates women. It's being in control of themselves. And you can't have that without accountability. You have sex partners, you be accountable. That, like, here, I say here like it's a place. We're in 3 different locations in 2 different countries. But, Honey Badger Radio, we're involved with a variety of people. We have a variety of people contributing to our shows. We have everything from housewives to porn stars. Everybody I know in this group, everybody I know that's involved, and everybody I know that we've interacted with, accountability is a defining factor in that.
Yeah.
And it's not about who you're with or what you do. It's about you being in charge of you and you being responsible for your impact on other people. And I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, there's definitely something beyond sex. And
Yeah.
I mean, as you mentioned, a porn star is like, yeah, that is, I definitely do independent porn and produce it as well as star in it. And the curious thing about that is that I've actually been with only 2 men in my life. And I make videos with lots of women. We together with my partner make videos with women, but he's actually the only male that I've ever done porn with. And so there's an element of, I guess, I don't know what is with me, but I do have an element of wanting to have that one, like the monogamous sort of, here's my one person and we complete each other and it's perfect and it's great. But on the other hand, like having, non-monogamous, poly type, polysexual experience with, other women and threesomes and with women and men and whatever the fuck, that's great. It's a great time. But there has, for me anyway, and this could be because I'm, Asperger's, and I had like a particularly difficult childhood, etc. But I need my partner. I need to feel loved. I need to have a connection with at least one person, you know what I mean? And the sex
Totally.
part is great, but there needs to be a sort of an emotional connection, or not a connection with the people I have sex with specifically, because I mean, in porn, it's your job. Like I've met women that have that morning and then we've had sex. Like that's just what happens in porn. But I've always needed the social sort of aspect, a relationship aspect. And I feel like that is a big part of the problem with promiscuity and the empowerment and all that. You focus so much on, having just however many people you can have, but we never focus on what it takes to keep a relationship going. Never focus on the sacrifice, and because love, to me, the definition of love is sacrificing your own happiness for someone else. That is the absolute definition of love. So when you have a relationship, you need to know how to keep it. You need to know how to give to it, how to have compromise, how to have communication, and you need to be invested in staying together instead of just throwing it out and getting a new one. And I think that is the problem, and that's why your mother had has problems now, or wasn't happy, because it is empty to go from person to person to person, because I feel like we all, as humans, we need that emotional connection, we need that relationship, but women are not taught what it takes to keep a relationship. I mean, every show you look at, every idea of relationships, you have the man says, "Oh, I fucked it up. I'm going to try to win you back. I ruined the best thing that happened to me." It's always somehow men's fault. It's always somehow something that the guy does, and the men know that they need to work at relationships. Women, though, not so much.
Boy.
So I think that's really where the problem with that hollowness of promiscuity, where it comes from. It's not about the sex. It's not about how many people you invited to your bed. It's about the lack of a connection with someone, and when women are never taught how to keep a connection going. And I think
my gosh. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, I'm done.
Just basically, you can really see exactly what you've said in my mother, because she has met like 500 assholes in her life, because she's always perfect. She's never done anything wrong. These are just people who are like terrible guys. It's all the guy's fault. That's why she couldn't have a relationship with them. Like the last couple of times she's texted me saying, "Well, I'm dating this guy and he's going to take care of me." I have made bets with my husband about how long is this one going to last. I can usually say it's going to last less than 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden he's going to be an asshole with a major problem that prevents her from keeping in touch with him. And sure enough, I'm always right. She never takes responsibility. She's like the quintessential problem that we're talking about here, the lack of female responsibility. Exactly, yeah.
Well, and
it's
this
a
is
female problem.
Cluster B nightmare.
Yeah, this is something that I've recognized with the way I see, that a lot of the girls around me were raised differently, I think, than I was. And part of it is, like, everybody seems to give girls the better shop around talk, and they don't give it to guys, right? Girls are told, to look for what can he do for you. Does he have a good job? Is he a stable person? Is he this? Is he that?
Yeah.
Not, the other way around. What can you do for him? Guys are taught, what can you do for her? Not the other way around. What can she do for you? Is she a stable person? Is she going to be a good mother to your children? It used to be normal to teach both boys and girls that it was important to be a stable partner and to be dedicated to your family, because it was your family against the world. And then we get this notion within our gynocentric society of romantic courtship that comes in. And all of a sudden, that's only the guy's responsibility, and it gets flipped for the girls. And instead of just being dedicated to their family, now they're expecting him to be dedicated to her, but they don't necessarily have to be dedicated back. And I think that's where our society really, really went wrong. It wasn't necessarily bad for marriage to evolve from a contractual thing between families and tribes and stuff. It wasn't necessarily bad for the people who were going to be in the marriage to choose their own partners. What's bad is when you tell one side of the potential marriage that everything is on his shoulders, and you tell the other side of the potential marriage that everything is in her court. That's damaging, and that's why over time we ended up with more and more and more divorce, especially when we made it so that the person who's told everything is in your court and he owes you everything, that if she decides the marriage isn't working out and she leaves, he has to pay her to go, and she can take half or more of everything they have with her, and nobody's going to judge her for it, but everybody's going to judge him. So we've ended up in a situation here where we've created the perfect hurricane to hit marriage with. And of course our society wonders why the hell we have so much divorce. And why the hell we have so many broken families and so many single moms. Well, that's why. No accountability for women and no rights for men. Going on to the next super chat, we have Pallet Beard gave us £5 and says, "Oh, Anna, your English is great for a Russian hacker." And is Allison
Made by Putin himself.
there? You go. Is Allison in the Statler and Waldorf box keeping everything on track? Hi, Allison. Hi, everyone. So I'm not sure what the Statler and Waldorf box is. That's a reference I missed.
The Brits, they're just silly.
Oh, okay. Then we have
isn't that the two Muppets?
oh
Statler
God,
and
okay.
Yeah.
I never remember their names. I just remember the behavior. We have
so yeah, Allison's our puppet master with her fingers up her booty holes.
okay.
There we go.
Well, somebody
Keeping
has
everybody
to.
on track. Yes,
That's
exactly.
right. After all, we can't have accountability for ourselves.
No.
Blame it on Allison. It's a popular thing to do.
There we go. Allison's got big shoulders.
Happy birthday, Allison, by the way.
Yay! Happy birthday!
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, like
40
yesterday.
this
That's
week.
funny.
Yeah, fuck
Yeah,
it's gonna
yesterday.
be my 30th in January.
Oh, wow. See, now you're getting old. We're going to give you your cane, and you're going to have to rattle it at people and yell, "Get off my lawn!"
Yeah, I have bad knees like I do.
Yeah. And my knees are abominations, except, if I wanted to join a band, I could be a percussionist. I could play the aggravated patella. We have, let's see, I guess this is Lecoro. That's a C. Lecoro gives us £10 and says, "The only way for men to obtain legitimate consent is to be clairvoyant. Great to see Anna back on HBR, and very best Christmas wishes to all the honey badgers from Aberdeen, Scotland." Wow.
Oh,
It's
Oh, cool.
my favorite accent in the world.
right.
Scottish. Oh,
Mhm.
yes. Thank
Yeah.
you.
that is actually, I know everybody loves French, but I think Scottish is the sexiest language. Or
Scottish
at
and
least
Australian.
English spoken with a Scottish accent is the sexiest
Oh,
language.
yeah.
Scottish, then Australian in that order. Sorry, that's final.
I'm a big
I
fan
got
of
it.
Irish.
Yeah, I
Irish
gotta
accents.
go for Irish. Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
Scottish and Irish.
Actually, British too. Certain British accents are incredibly sexy.
Yes.
But actually, there aren't very many that don't have that. But maybe it's just because they're different. Not like the accent that got me all confused that one time at the gas station when somebody came in asking Sarong your iron machine, and I had this discussion. What is he asking me about? We don't have an iron machine. The pumps are made of aluminum. Everything here is made of what machine is he thinking is made of iron? And I'm asking him questions, and he's getting like all irritated with me. And finally I said, "All right, I feel really stupid. I know that's an accent thing. I'm not understanding what you're saying. What does the machine do?" And he goes, iron machine. You use it to put iron in your tars." Oh. Air machine. And that's my story on accents. I have a terrible time with accents, but I still love listening to them. Joey Jojo gives us $5 and says, seems that most feminism is just deny men a purpose, demonize men at every step in life, and take away anything that can make a man's life bearable. Well, you have a point there. You've got your finger on the edge of the button. Feminism is about obtaining money and obtaining political power. And in order to do that, since men are the gender that is subjected to disposability, they're the ones to demonize, they're the ones to make the topic of the threat narrative, they're the ones to control. And that you control the things that drive human beings. And sex is probably our biggest driver besides physical hunger. If they didn't have sex to control, they'd be controlling your access to food. And that's the bottom line with feminism. It's entirely mercenary at the upper levels. And what you get with grassroots feminism is those upper levels give them the excuse they need to be as selfish as they can. And so that's basically, you're right, but you're right for a reason that is even more dastardly than that. It's about money and power, and they don't care who they hurt to get it. And they know that hurting men gets it for them quickly and easily. And I just lost one of the super chats. I hope it's in our... okay. Well, then we have...
Hokey Bukisa just gave us one. That was in the
Yeah.
video, and it just kind of...
It
It was
kinda-
420. It was 420 as always,
Oh,
and it was
God.
something that Hannah and Count Dankula doing a thing together.
I might still have that one. I'm on... Pallet Beard is next, gave us 5 more pounds and said, lots of misogyny in the chat. Come on, people, think who you are listening to right now. Don't make dumbass sweeping statements that make us look dumb. So my thought on that is people are going to express themselves. It's no skin off my nose. It rolls off my back, and I don't hate hearing it. I don't love hearing it. I don't care. It's
Yeah.
understandable that people get to that point.
Yeah.
And
I want
I hate
people
the
to-
idea of censoring just because of that.
I want people to feel comfortable expressing themselves on the live chat. Like, I mean, I know it's not all going to be like super friendly and loving towards us or anything like that, but the last thing that we want to do is prevent people from being able to say what they want to say, right? I know that a lot of people are angry. I know that they want to get that out, and
the venting.
Yeah, this is a safe place for them to do that. At
And
the risk of sounding like I'm saying safe space.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, since anti-censorship is not something that you can do sometimes. You're either anti-censorship or you're not. You know,
Yeah.
the only exceptions is if something is actually flat out harmful. You know, like child porn. I would agree with censoring that. I would agree with stopping that because there's a victim. There's an actual victim. There's no victim if you say women are all liars. You know, okay.
Yeah.
So
That's just like
if
your
you're
opinion,
making
man.
you're making a statement about your experience or the way you feel or whatever. So and you say that nobody's damaged by it. It's not that somebody's suddenly like, oh my gosh, that guy said women are all liars. I can never believe anything a woman says again. You know.
Yeah.
And you gotta deal with the fact that everybody is Schrodinger's liar. Every person that you meet can lie to you. And you can't be gullible. So I'm not going to turn around and feel damaged because somebody said women are all liars. And I understand that there are people that are more comfortable with that and people that are less comfortable with that. And not everybody has dealt with people on Twitter telling them they should be raped so they'd know what it's like. And not everybody has dealt with people on Twitter calling them names that are considered obscene and then turning around and reporting their responses. I think that happens to a lot of trans women from my understanding. When I talked about it, several of them came back and said, yeah, TERFs do that all the time. But and the other thing is it's not necessarily misogynistic to criticize women. You know, you turn around and talk about these issues and you talk about The fact that we are dealing with consistent and widespread dysfunctional behavior and attitudes coming from women.
Yeah,
When you
not to
when you
mention that it's
criticize the women because of those things, it's not hateful.
well, not to mention when there's so few other women like calling this shit out. Like you have to go to the tiny corners of the internet to actually find clusters of women calling this stuff out. You don't see this sort of thing very often in real life.
No, unfortunately, that's part of the problem. We do treat, as a society, all too often, we do treat criticizing women and applying standards for accountability to women. We treat that as if it's misogynistic. When
Yeah.
the truth is, if you're going to call something to do with criticism of women misogynistic, fear of criticizing women is far more misogynistic. Taking accountability away from somebody is very handicapping. Very handicapping. So to move on from that, we have Xeranx gave us $20 and said, I've thought maybe women can learn accountability as children the way men do. But how does teaching a young girl to be accountable the same as a boy work if dad won't do it or mom will correct dad if he tries? And now that's a very important point. You have two things going on there. With parents, a lot of times the child of the opposite sex gets doted on and adored because they're basically chibi versions of the sex that you're attracted to. And although it's not a sexual thing, it's an adoration thing and your
Yeah, it's like a
heartstrings being
miniature
pulled
version of your
thing.
partner.
Right. And they
Totally.
look like your partner. They look like the person you made them with. And they look like you. So sometimes you have the dads will spoil the daughters and the moms will spoil the sons. What's really important is that society needs to value teaching kids accountability. And if we have a society that values teaching kids accountability, which we used to, we'll have more adults and more parents who recognize the difference between compassion and practical compassion, love and tough love, and adoration and the importance of not letting it get in the way of providing your child with the tools he or she needs to have the best adult life possible. And without accountability, you can't do that. So it's tough. Being a parent is not ever a cakewalk. Even with a kid that is kind of a naturally good kid, most kids are like that. They want to be good people. They want to be liked. They want to achieve. They want to be like mom and dad. So you just you have to be a good guide.
Yeah.
And it's, even though it's hard to dish out disappointment sometimes in order to do that, or to push somebody to do things that are hard for them, you just gotta knuckle down and do it. And you gotta knuckle down and demand that your fellow citizens do the same thing with their children. We can't coddle other parents. So that's my solution to that. And then we have TK Mao gave us $5. The one that I lost was I can't remember who it was and how much they gave us, but they said, so Sex in the City was a lie. So if that was you, you have to speak up and say so. But then we have TK Mao gave us $5 and said, what's HBR's take on the MGTOW personality turd flinging monkey? The answer to that is we don't have a take on any of the MGTOW personalities. They are who they are, and we are who we are. And we're not gonna answer. I'm basically not gonna answer that question with anything more than that. Hoki Bukisa gave us $4.20 and said, Anna and Count Dankula Kickstarter, make it happen! And last but not least, Pallet Beard gave us 2 more pounds and said, general sex biases is what we disagree with, isn't it? And I'm guessing this goes back to the misogyny thing. People are allowed to have their own opinions. All right, that's
Yeah.
not what we're fighting with. People are allowed to have their own opinions. People are allowed to have their own attitudes. We might disagree with the attitudes they take. We might disagree with the opinions they have, but we don't disagree with them being able to state their opinions. And we
Yeah,
can argue back and forth over whether the opinion has a sound basis. We can
that's the
argue,
important distinction for
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
Like, I don't like to generalize anything about any group of people based on what a few people do. I don't really think that it's productive. I think that it forms like divisive opinions about people. But like, if other people have had like, say 75% bad experiences with the women in their lives, and they say, women are terrible people, then I'm not going to go and necessarily worry about their views, least of all in a live chat on YouTube, right? Like, if I'm talking to somebody in therapy and they're like, oh yeah, I don't want to have these views anymore, then we can maybe talk about it. But yeah, I'm not about trying to prevent people from having these viewpoints based on their own experiences, but what I view is often very different, and that's the beauty of it. We can have these different opinions and we can still have conversations together, and here we all are just conversing together.
and it's really important. And I'm going to stand by what I've said before also about, you create echo chambers when you make certain opinions verboten in the public sphere. That you
Yeah.
can't say that in public. Okay, well, it's going to get said in private. And it's going to get said back and forth between people who don't hear why it's wrong because they're busy telling each other why they think it's right. And then they come up with really stupid arguments for why it's right. And then they come back out into the public sphere and they make those arguments expecting them to be so clever that you will have nothing to respond to them with. And it's very annoying. That's the least that happens. If you get a group with a dysfunctional idea and it never gets challenged because they're relegated to an echo chamber because they can't say it anywhere where people might disagree with it because it gets censored because it's that bad of an idea. Then you get, at some levels they come out of their forum with violence. It's okay to punch Nazis, right? It's okay, and we can call anybody we disagree with Nazis. So now
Or
we're all
kill
gonna
all
dress in
men.
yeah, we're all gonna dress in black and run around areas where big things are happening and beat up trash cans until we really get our guts up, and then we'll beat up old men because we're Antifa, you know, and
Yeah.
that's what happens when you get ideas that end up in little echo chambers one way or another. It leads to
Yeah.
anything from annoying assholes with bad arguments that they think are clever to really, really dumb shits running around with baseball bats hitting people because of disagreement.
Yeah.
And on that note, I think we are done so far with the super chats. And I think we could probably go back to, we pointed out regarding raising kids with the idea of accountability and the idea of recognizing in a relationship that both sexes are human and that, you're mutually engaged in an activity together and you're mutually involved in each other's welfare. But I wanted to go back to the biggest failure, I think, in the so-called sexual revolution, which seems to be, in a lot of ways, it's a sexual de-evolution instead, and is that idea that we divide personal responsibility for setting and maintaining boundaries, so that men are responsible for respecting boundaries and women aren't even responsible for communicating them. That's a situation that's been evolving at a rapid acceleration, I guess you could say, in the Western world for the last several years. Recently, Sweden just passed a law that that makes the enthusiastic consent standard law now. You actually have to, obtain verbal consent even if the female in the interaction is actively engaging in sex seeking. So I don't know if I wanted to get your guys' opinions on that. That this sort of thing started in the U.S. and Canada, from what I can see with the enthusiastic consent standard, and it seems to be spreading everywhere. I don't know, had either of you read about that particular law passing, and I know, Anna, didn't that also pass in California?
I'm not entirely sure about that.
So I was thinking that California's standard now for consent had basically had verbal consent as the standard.
Oh gosh, I just saw an article today. I think that it was posted on the Discord, but I might be wrong. About Sweden requiring like explicit consent now, and that you have to prove that it was explicit consent, like basically have a recording. Pretty soon they're going to be on track to requiring contracts for sex over there right away here. It's blood curdling, if you ask me. It's so far away from what rational sexual relationships are that I just don't even know where to go with it.
I'm trying to find this information. It seems like the last one that was passed was in 2014 when they had the enthusiastic consent.
Yeah,
Okay.
the yes means yes standard. Ziranx just pointed that out in a super chat too. We have Joey Jojo who says the sexual revolution was a mistake, and
No, Hannah.
he gave us the clap.
The sexual revolution was a mistake.
Yeah, and see now we're all, especially me. Like all of us are in trouble. I can't afford to go to the doctor for this, Joey. You gave us all the clap. And Ziranx says California standard gave us $2 and said California standards was yes means yes. That's something that I've been seeing in universities, and it's been interesting because you have feminists arguing this out of both sides of their faces. They talk about it. This was something that they promoted Vassar University's consent standard, which said that consent was explicit and spoken, and then at the same time said that there were unspoken things that could also be consent, and then they turned around and treated it as though the statements that unspoken things could also be consent made it not yes means yes.
I found the article.
Oh, good.
It was something
but
yeah.
then they also treated it as though men were responsible for obtaining that verbal consent, even though they wanted to treat things that were not verbal as consent. So you have the situation where they're telling you one thing but then doing another, and the universities have all gone along with that all across the United States, into Canada, into the UK, into basically the EU. You're seeing various universities penalizing guys for having consensual sex with somebody who comes back later and says, well, consent wasn't verbal, so it didn't exist. It doesn't matter that I pushed him down on the bed and I was on top. I didn't agree to that out loud, so I was raped.
Yeah. So like this article, I did find it. It was posted yesterday. December 20th. Sweden moves to require explicit consent for sex. Sweden is moving to change its rape law to shift the burden of proof from the victim to the alleged attacker in a proposal that would require people to get explicit consent before sexual contact. Deputy Prime Minister Isabella Lovin said the recent Me Too anti-harassment campaign has shown that there is a need for the new legislation, which is expected to be approved Thursday in Parliament. Under current Swedish law, someone can be prosecuted for rape only if it is proven that they used threats or violence. Under the proposal, rape could be proven if the accuser didn't give their explicit verbal agreement or clearly demonstrate their desire to engage in sexual activity.
So it is yes means yes.
Yeah.
It's exactly yes means yes. So this is what happens all over the world. This is what's been happening for years and years and years. These standards, these legal standards, they're sort of incubated in universities in the United States. and then they work their way into U.S. state and federal law, and then eventually they get adopted in other countries. Now, isn't Sweden though? Sweden's also the country that has all these stories of sexual assaults by immigrants that are supposedly refugees, but then turn out to be actually be part of terrorist organizations in various countries that are, Muslim terrorist organizations and so on. Um, so I'm kind of suspecting that what led to this was this wave of conflict between uh, Western values and this complete lawless situation that these supposed refugees that are not refugees are coming from, and them thinking that they're going into a situation where their lawlessness can continue, and coming into conflict with people that don't accept that. Except that, isn't it also true that there's been numerous instances where the state has ruled in favor of lawlessness in those cases, specifically
Yeah.
because they are refugees?
Well, I was going to say, I think that's a little idealistic because I'm pretty sure that there was an article that literally stated that, oh, it's less bad when immigrants do it than when like white Swedish men do it, because they're supposed to know better, and clearly these immigrants, they're just like children. Haven't we heard this argument before?
Yeah, and I'm not, it's it's so old.
It
And I'm
really
not giving them
is.
the benefit of the doubt on that. I don't think that they don't know any better, and I don't think the argument that they don't know any better is anything but insulting to everybody. I
Yeah.
think that what happens is, like I said, they came from an environment where they don't have to care, and they go into an environment where people are accustomed to everybody having to care, and that clash. I think this is the backlash from that clash, and what we're going to see here, though, is it's women in Sweden ushered that in. You saw pictures all over the internet of women holding up signs. We welcome you. We welcome this. This is okay. Go ahead. Um, and then now they're turning around and saying, "Oh my God, this terrible thing is happening to us. We're victims of all of this, and you have to punish all the men, and you have to hold all the men accountable." And this is the result. So where
Yeah.
you have a situation where the people who were committing the crimes didn't face accountability because, oh, those poor refugees, and the women who ushered the situation in and then didn't take any precautions for their own safety, they're not facing any accountability for protecting themselves and for having a little more sense about the political environment that they usher into their country. Instead, the men of Sweden are being forced into accountability for this. It's basically like going to the neighbors because some guy and his wife had a fight and beat on each other, and arresting the husband of the neighbor and saying, that guy's responsible for this. I don't know. To go back to it though, this really goes back to, once again, personal agency. And where's the agency?
Yep.
We are having a spillover now into it's something we mentioned earlier. Wanted to touch upon. This is way, 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 way back in the beginning, but we brought up McDowell recently, and the whole, I don't know what the church flinging monkey is. I didn't know there were personalities among McDowell, but it hurts my heart to see men that disheartened and that sort of frustrated and resentful and hurt by women, by society, by whatever the fuck. But at the same time, also, I feel like I don't know, it's just really, really sad because this is sort of the advice we gave a little bit, a year or two ago to people going to college, and it's not a bad advice, but to the point of avoiding women, like we mentioned, not having women. Some people are not hiring women now because of the potential
Yeah.
destruction of the allegations that they can level against people. And the same with, I've been seeing this since, a few years ago, of guys talking about not wanting to approach women in college, not wanting to even try to date, because the one false accusation and your life is ruined. And
Well,
false
yeah.
accusations happen quite often, no matter what feminists want us to believe. We have very, very publicized proof, such as the Rolling
Yeah.
Stone story and others, as well as, I bet most of us here have an experience from our real lives where a woman was leveling accusations against a man unfairly. I know I do. I know Hannah does. So it's not like it doesn't happen all the
Yeah.
fucking time.
Well, it's
So
horrible that we have to give that advice naturally. Like I know, for example, my grandparents, they had the most wonderful, loving relationship, and I think that a lot of people back then had the same thing. But these days, if it's a choice between like either risking it to try to find that same kind of relationship that was commonplace back then, or and risk getting accused of something that is becoming more and more common, I'm sorry to say, or to just go on your own way and try and protect yourself from that, like it's kind of a no-brainer what a lot of people are going to choose in that case. And it's, yeah, it is sad that we have to give that advice, but unfortunately, like, we can't control what all of these people are doing, right? So yeah, it's not a great situation at all. I wish that I could change it, but hey, we're just like individuals, right? Like we're trying our best to spread the message, but we can only do so much. So
And this is one of the things that as a movement we need to fight for. In the Violence Against Women Act in the United States and in laws that mirror it all over the world, there is guidance that is given to court personnel and prosecutors. Court personnel and prosecutors are basically taught when a woman uses the court system to abuse, you cannot hold her accountable. You can't hold her accountable for filing a false complaint. Even though in most countries, in fact, I don't know any country where it's not illegal to file a false complaint because the government doesn't like it when you waste their time. They like
yeah.
wasting your time, but you're not allowed to waste their time. It's against the law. Um, but you're not allowed to prosecute people who file false charges, women who file false charges of sex or false complaints of sexual assault or of spousal battery, basically intimate partner violence. Not allowed to prosecute women who perjure themselves in the course of testifying in in evidence of a false complaint. You're not allowed to. You're not even allowed to prosecute for lying to a police officer during an investigation of a false complaint. So you have this situation where she can break the law over and over again in the course of using the court system and the law enforcement system to abuse a guy. She can repeatedly break the law. She can repeatedly waste the state's time and money, and there's no recourse for the guy, and there's no accountability. There's no consequences for her actions. So the thing that needs to be pushed for is legislation that removes that training. That basically says the courts don't need special training just for this specific type of situation, this specific type of crime. It's not any more special than murder. It's not any more special than armed robbery. It's not any more special than tax evasion. It is a violent crime, and it's something that you deal with based on the facts. And if somebody introduces something that is not fact, they should be accountable for that, regardless of what type of crime it is. So, push your legislators or legislators. Write to your congressman, write to your parliamentarians. This is something that actually could be changed.
Yeah, slightly switching gears a little bit because from what I understand, chat is cancer, as always. But from what I understand today, chat is a bit of a little extra cancer. And I just wanted to sort of have it on record that as you know, do your thing. Like if you want to go your own way, fuck. Want to hate women, fucking do it. but
No,
you
if
know,
you want to
part
go
of
your
me,
own way, don't fuck.
right, but part of me wants to call out the fact that, you know, when you paint all women as evil just because they have a vagina, that's the same thing as feminism painting all men evil because they have a dick. Okay, so if you're going to be all Mgatow and think that you're different from feminism, don't fall in the same trap of sweeping generalizations and hating someone because of their gender. Becoming sexist yourself then fucking too, just like feminists are sexist. So just fucking chill, guys, and like try to love. You know, it's just better. Do it for you. Forgiveness is not for the other person, it's for yourself. So try to see them, women, you know, people who hurt you as fucking children. They're kids. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. They're running around with scissors, fucking stabbing themselves and everyone around them. You know, see them for the half animal that they are, and have some forgiveness, some understanding. Otherwise you're almost as bad as the feminists that paint all men with broad brush. So yeah, I just want to put that on record.
Well, it's
I just
definitely
want to.
dysfunctional. I will go there. It is dysfunctional to get into that degree of
Yeah.
anger and that degree of resentment. And it's a heavy thing to carry around too, because I've been there for other reasons, not necessarily with an entire gender, but with people. Um, and it is it's kind of a rough line to toe. It is not right to say that people cannot say these things. It is not right to
Yeah.
say that people cannot criticize. It isn't right to say that people can't generalize. And it isn't right to say, keep that out of the chat. But it is
Yes.
perfectly acceptable to criticize the ideas. All ideas should be subject to examination and criticism. And that is included. And
Yes.
I agree. It is dysfunctional to take yourself to a place where rather than dealing with people as individuals, you deal with ideas about groups of people, and you can't have exceptions, and you can't have interaction with individuals who are parts of those groups because hey, you've already condemned the entire group. I even have a handful of friends who are feminist. They deal with it when I criticize feminism, and I deal with it when they criticize non-feminists. Especially when they criticize the men's rights movement. You have to be able to have those conversations.
Yeah.
But that is not in a million years to say that it is in any way a functional response to wallow in anger. You know, there's other aspects of how to deal with, and I know there are people in the chat that are taking the word hurt differently than I think Anna means. Damage isn't just hurt feelings, but it's hurt. You get hurt when you break your leg, and you get hurt when you get a paper cut. And just because getting hurt can describe a paper cut doesn't mean that when you describe getting your leg broken as getting hurt, or losing an organ as getting hurt, that you're
Yeah.
minimizing it.
Yeah. And I totally agree with with both of you. I think that on the one hand, I think that people should have the right to say what they want, but on the other hand, I do think that people should have the right to challenge it. And there was one comment that was posted that it kind of I just wanted to comment on it, and it's just like, why is it okay for women to act like bitch, but MGTOW can't? And okay, on the one hand, it's okay for people to act like a bitch in the sense that we should all have the free speech to act like a bitch if we really want to. But on the other hand, it's not okay. It's not ideal for people to act like a bitch because being a bitch is a bad thing. I don't care if it's coming from a woman, I don't care who it's coming from. I think that being a bitch is just being an unpleasant, unreasonable individual. And I think that we should strive to not be that. But damn it, if that is what you want to do, then I will fight for your right to do it.
I just got a question. Well, two actually. Does the
Okay.
OH in MGTOW OH stand for Ohio? Cause I'm in Dayton. That's the first thing, and I would be happy to have a talk. The second thing is, don't call yourself a bitch. Just because you are angry doesn't mean you're a bitch. If you're making criticisms and you have criticisms to make, that's not being a bitch. Being a
True.
bitch
Yeah.
is complaining when there's nothing to complain about. Being a bitch is being mean to people who don't deserve it.
Being a bitch
Being mean
is
for the
being
sake of being selfish.
being a bitch is being angry at your husband when he cleans the bathroom instead of calling a maid to do it.
Yeah, that's being a bitch, and it's not okay for women to act like a bitch. It's not okay for anybody
No.
to act like a bitch. It should be criticized when people act like a bitch.
Yeah.
But you just don't call yourself that. So Hoki Bukisa gave us $10 and said, I'm not gonna say this as loud as he typed it because it's in all caps. Amen and a preach. And it is true. This is one of those situations where we're not arguing for censorship, but we are saying, have some sense. And it's not wrong to criticize. It's not wrong to criticize the dysfunction in women, but it's not functional to. It's kind of lazy actually to generalize. The same way it's lazy when feminists do it. And I know people want to say that the lazy end of the criticisms of the opposite gender make feminists and MGTOW the same. My reason for disagreeing with that is that feminists have gotten laws passed that legislate discrimination against men on the basis of their generalizations. MGTOW don't even lobby. So it's
Yeah.
not the same at that point. And until MGTOW start getting laws passed that legislate discrimination against women, it's kind of hard to call them the same. And the other thing is, feminism may not be a monolith, but it all has one central ideological basis. MGTOW is a phenomenon, and they can't even agree on the rules of what it means to be MGTOW. And they don't have to, because it's an individualistic phenomenon, not a movement, not an organized belief system, and nobody can tell anybody else whether they can call themselves that or not. So they're not mirror images of each other, but it is still kind of dumb if you act like the mirror end of feminist thought in the course of criticizing female behavior that feminism gave a bazooka to, if you know the reference. Then we have Duck, formerly known as Censor, gave us $5 and says 2D is less than 3D, and I'm assuming dimensions is what that's referring to, unless he's talking about dicks. But either way, it's correct. 2 is less than 3. So I think that's probably as far as I would like to see the discussion on MGTOW versus feminists and what we are and are not allowed to talk about in the chat, and what's functional, dysfunctional they're going, because it's not
Yeah.
really the topic of today's show. Although communication is one of the things I mentioned in the importance. And I'm going to go back to that list. I might think I'm going to probably close the show. And after the discussion, I'd like to see our listeners and our commenters consider. I said at the beginning, our topic is the gender gap and accountability for sexual conduct. We hear a lot about sexual misconduct, usually with plenty of blame being heaped on the male sex as an entity instead of a population of individuals. But there's little talk, if any, relating accountability simply to sexual conduct. Much of the conflict between the genders over sexual conduct today is a result of stark gender differences in accountability for setting and enforcing one's own boundaries, protecting one's own privacy, recognizing one's own autonomy and exercising one's own personal agency, recognizing others' autonomy and accepting others' personal agency, respecting others' boundaries, respecting others' privacy, and last but not least, communication. So what I'd like our listeners to do, once we're no longer in a live chat and you can leave comments, is answer me. Were accountability for these aspects of sexual conduct equal between the sexes? How different do you think modern discussion on sexual conduct and sexual misconduct would be? And with that, I'm going to bring the show to a close. So to remind you, here at Honey Badger Radio, we have been labeled guilty of wrongthink. And as such, we are on the wrong side of YouTube. If you don't want to wake up one morning and find yourself unable to find our content because our channels have been incarcerated in the YouTube gulag for things like talking about female accountability, go to badgerfeed.com. And we know now that we've moved to a digest format for podcasting. So if you're listening to this in an audio format, you've discovered our podcasting and you want to continue to receive that, to still follow our uncut live streams that way, you'll be able to find those at badgerfeed.com. So just go to badgerfeed.com. It's where all the cool kids are. And to all the cool kids listening tonight, to my co-hosts, and to everyone who helps make Honey Badger live streams happen, thank you and good night.